Corrine Barraclough show. Coming up, I'll be talking to criminal lawyer Samir Banga about this New South Wales coercive control bill coming from Labor. I've been absolutely slammed with messages about this, so I know it's something which is of huge concern to many of you. First, I want to talk about a story which I've shared on my Facebook page. I've had some interesting feedback which I want to share with you. It's the heartbreaking story from the UK of Jay Cheshire, who killed himself in 2015 after being falsely accused of rape by a girl. He was just 17 years old. His sister has now spoken out in a BBC documentary called I Am Not a Rapist. She says her brother was distraught to find himself at the centre of a police investigation when a girl accused him of rape in 2015. The girl dropped the charges 2 weeks later, but by then damage had already been done. Jay had, to use his sister's words, completely spiralled. She said it was like he'd had his soul ripped away. I'm not going to go into the details now about how he ended his life. They're discussed in the documentary and it's heartbreaking. But I want to focus on this story as clear proof that girls do make false allegations. It's denied in society. Repeatedly, you'll hear left-wing mainstream media deny that women make false allegations. It's all part of the narrative and propaganda around evil men and patriarchy, which is frankly a load of bull. I want to share some of the messages that I received in response to this story, because if we're a society that gives a damn about mental health, like the government keeps pretending that we do, we need to get honest about this so that we can start to fix it. James commented, I am being set up daily. I completely feel the same, like killing myself daily. Sue wrote, false accusations of sexual assault and rape are very common. One opportunity a woman can make these accusations and everyone will believe her. Most men cannot afford legal representation. She's right there. Mike said, this is why false accusations must be punished by a mandatory 8 years and permanent registry on the sex offender list. Wendy wrote, my son was accused by a girl in his grade 7 class of raping her in a classroom. Luckily, there were 2 other students there that weren't friends of his that came forward and said nothing had happened and that she was lying. It really knocked my son around, and the rumours she spreads around other students believe are just horrible. Luckily, the teachers believed him and the other students in the end. If she's doing that at 12 years old, what's she going to be like when she's older? Cecily said, it happens more than many people realise. Young girls, for many different reasons, make up stories without fully realising the consequences of their actions. And that, right there, is my real issue with this false narrative that women don't make false allegations. It may well be that young girls make up accusations without realising the consequences of their actions, but we need to make them aware. False accusations take lives. They literally cost lives. And I'm sorry, if we care about men's mental health and we also care about all lives equally, we have to get honest about this. And then we can start to take steps to fix it. It's not good enough. I have to share this really heartbreaking email that I received from a mother who has repeatedly been in contact with me with concerns about her own son. Hi Corrine, she writes, I cried this morning when I read your post about that poor 17-year-old boy who killed himself after being falsely accused of rape. My son's ex falsely accused my son of rape, physical and verbal abuse, control and manipulation. She accused him of everything except child sexual abuse. In 2013, he was devastated when he read her false allegations. He asked her, why did you say all those things? She replied, it wasn't my idea. My solicitor told me to say it. This is what's going on in our family law system. This is the truth, and we must make it known. None of us who know the truth can sit down or shut up about it. Keep raising your voices. I'm working on a pro-family petition to take to the government early in the new year, and I'll keep you posted on that. I'll need you all to use your voices. Get involved, sign the petition, and all stand together. On that note, I want to return to this dangerous coercive control bill, which is already before New South Wales Parliament. The bill, drafted by Labour MP Anna Watson, proposes a mandatory jail time of 5 to 10 years for coercive control. But coercive control is not a gender issue. This all comes back to the narrative that I've been talking about. Left-wing media feeds the line that women don't make false allegations. Left-wing mainstream media pushes propaganda that this is a gender issue and men must be held accountable. It's not true. Last Tuesday, Attorney General Mark Speakman announced that the government will establish a parliamentary committee that will hold a public inquiry allowing stakeholders to have their say. Speakman is also the Minister for the Prevention of Domestic Violence, which, as we all know, in this country and around the Western world, has been hoodwinked into the gendered anti-men narrative. At the heart of this sits the Duluth model, which insists that men are evil perpetrators and women are innocent victims, which, as you and I both know, is not the whole story. Back to Speakman's announcement, it's the word stakeholders which is concerning here. There are women's groups with a vested interest in pushing anti-male propaganda to secure funding. It is fraudulent to assert that coercive control is a gender issue. So why on earth are such stakeholders being allowed to have their say? To discuss this further, I got in touch with Samir Banga, a criminal lawyer from Sydney, New South Wales. Let's listen to his thoughts on this bill. So, Sam, I wanted to specifically talk to you about this New South Wales coercive control bill. And I have asked for some kind of reader questions. So I guess that's kind of average people questions, because people are really quite fearful, I think, about what is going on here. So let me first ask you, what do you think of this bill? Let's just start really generally.
I think it's a noble bill. I understand what it's trying to do. I just don't think it's the right way about it. I think there's other ways we need to investigate first. I understand that we're saying the UK has done something similar, but it is a little bit different to what we've introduced. I think this bill is kind of fraught with problems. There's going to be issues, and it seems to make it look like domestic violence is a one-way, I guess it's one-way traffic, which it's not. And that's one of the discussions we had previously. We need to look at everything as a whole and look at how it starts. No one wants domestic violence. I don't think any of us are propagating or condoning domestic violence, but I just don't think this bill has been investigated thoroughly enough. I do think it seems like a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, and I think it's a bit weak in what it's trying to. I shouldn't say weak's not the right word. It doesn't achieve what it's trying to do. In fact, it could even have the opposite effect, I've heard people say, and I don't disagree with that. I think in certain times, real victims may not come forward because this could be used against them. If this goes to court before we even get to the stage of violence, proving some of the issues around, or I should say the conduct that makes up coercive control could actually be a bit of a problem. And I just don't know if we're going to be able to do that just yet.
Yeah. Tell me, how would you even define coercive control from a legal perspective? Isn't it subjective?
Yes, and that's a big issue that I've actually spoken about. I was having this conversation yesterday. So a lot of issues around coercion and control are relative to the situation, and as you said, subjective. Now, what if we have a couple, any couple, let's take any couple, but their own subjective rules or the own boundaries they set for themselves are, you cannot speak to your exes. He says that to her, she says that to him. Now, who are we to say you can't do that? That's their own choice to say you guys can't, or either one of us cannot speak to our exes. But then technically speaking, that kind of falls under this because you're telling them they can't speak to certain people. And it gets further than that. That's just a very basic example. Certain things we should stay out of. Now, with the Preeti bill, let's say, it's trying to stop something a little bit different, and it's trying to stop a pattern of behavior that actually controls someone or the weaker party, which could be female or male, and it's trying to stop that becoming an egregious offence, which is what happened in that case. But here, you have a bill that's so open to interpretation. There are, as you just said, it is subjective. So how do we control what's actually going to become an offence? You need to educate the police on who to charge, how to charge. You have a discretion issue, which happens in domestic violence anyway. I think this is a slippery slope, to say the least, and there's more problems that are going to come out of this than actual effective stops to domestic violence and actually stopping domestic violence. So that's why I say I think it's a noble cause. I just don't think this is the right way around it. And certain acts could be covered under, I guess you could say, stalking anyway, if someone's gone to that extent. Maybe we should look at opening up what stalking means as opposed to saying this in itself. I do see a lot of problems. I don't see how this is actually going to work in practice at the moment. And I think a number of people that are going to be charged are probably going to be charged with things they shouldn't have been charged with, or should I say, should be charged under this act incorrectly. Now, the biggest problem we have with domestic violence is that you have a party that uses it against another party when in the case where there's no genuine victim. Again, when there's a genuine victim, it's different. But here you're also opening up the opportunity to go to the family court, which is what generally happens now, and say, oh, this person controlled everything from start to finish. They didn't let me speak to my friends. They didn't let me do this, didn't let me do that. That's word of mouth. Where's the proof? We're saying there's SMSs and stuff like that could be allowed. We're going to have to open it up to other parties that support that version. And most likely you're going to get two sides with two different sets of friends who are going to say, well, let's just say he, she in this case, and if she's a victim, he's a perpetrator. Some are going to support him, some are going to support her. It's just too fraught with issues. It's a bit, I just don't see how this is going to work. And I do see many problems coming out of this. So it's a bit of a long-winded answer, but I do see a number of issues.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And you've obviously represented both men and women,
Yes.
and you know the legal system very, very well. It just seems absolutely ludicrous to me that anyone could seriously be suggesting that control and emotional manipulation is only used by men. It's just not true, is it?
No, and what you said is spot on. That's a big issue in itself. In fact, a lot of defendants that come to me will say, no, I was controlled. I couldn't speak to someone else. She controlled my social media. She saw who my friends were. That gives you another example. If she, in this case that we're using, says, okay, you can't have this person on your social media, this person, why are you liking pictures of this girl? Isn't that control? So are we going to then charge her for control? But then when it gets to an extent that he loses, let's just say loses his shit, so to speak, he pushes her or hits her, then he's charged with the actual act of violence. She's then charged with coercion and control. It's probably not going to happen. He'll be charged with the act of violence and probably something else on top, because then she's going to say, well, no, he did this, this, and this. I agree. It's definitely not one-sided, and this act makes it look that way. And my problem is, in my experience, a number of men that have come to me, let's just say men in this case, they claim that they are controlled, and they're controlled for a big period of time. Then eventually, yes, some of them that are proven guilty, or some of them that are convicted on the actual assault, say, no, we were subjected to this for a long period of time, and then yes, one day I just lost it. Or she was yelling at me one day and I pushed her out of the way. That's still technically an offense because you've assaulted her, I guess, in the technical sense. So there's just too much around it. But yeah, I do think you're going to get a lot of men in this case saying, well, no, I was controlled. I had all my movements tracked. So looking at someone's social media, Instagram, who's following them, who they're following, whose pictures they're liking, that's a form of coercion or control, I should say. You're actually checking the everyday movements, which comes under 14A of this new bill.
What really worries me is that it's a very gendered suggestion. You know, one media outlet literally ran some reporting around this under the headline, New South Wales considers crackdown on dominating husbands. It's, you know, it's a complete gendered position. It's a worry, isn't it?
100% it is. And this is where even the second reading speech or the reading speech, and when the minister actually introduced it, we have a very one-sided argument. Now, I actually had a discussion with one of my PLT students on this topic, and she was coming at it from a bit more of a layperson perspective. And I said, look at our clients. Look what our clients say. Look at domestic violence and look at generally, we don't just have male clients, we have female clients as well. For someone to say this, you should know better, or we should, as people should know better. There's always more than one version to a story. And secondly, this type of issue goes both ways. It's definitely not just perpetrators, male perpetrators against females. Of course, those situations exist, but there's very much a situation on the reverse. Now, if we just forget about all that and we just say, no, it's, as you said, males that are doing it, or if we look at it at that perspective, we're going to miss a whole bunch of people. I do think part of the problem is reporting. And by that, I mean, males are less likely to come out and say, we were subjected to this, because they just feel, I guess, emasculated, so to speak, or they leave it till it's too late. They've already hit a stage where they've been charged with something, and then they go, okay, now this happened to me for years, but they're not taken seriously, because the problem then becomes, why did you not report this earlier? I think you're 100% spot on there. We need to look at this overall, not just the male, not just the female, and that's the way it comes across at the moment, that this is apparently only a problem that females are having. It's not. Domestic violence isn't, and this definitely isn't. From my experience as a lawyer, and even personally from what my friends tell me, it's not a one-sided perspective. I mean, so this is a bit one-sided. It's not a one-sided thing. It goes two ways.
So the kind of behaviour that the bill talks about, just to kind of drill into that a little bit, it talks about one, like making the other person dependent. It talks about isolating from friends, relatives, and sources of support. And it talks about controlling the person's day-to-day activities. What safeguards could possibly be put in place to ensure that this law, the proposed new law, wasn't misused?
That's my issue. At the moment, I don't see enough. I think, number one, we need to go back to the drawing board, go take a few steps back. And I think education is still the most important aspect of getting rid of, or the most important way, the biggest way we can get rid of domestic violence. We need to increase grassroots education on this. We need to say behavior that is coercive and controlling is wrong, but we can't just move straight to this step straight away, because at the moment I don't see that. Already, you're going to have a number of people either side complain that this is how they're being treated. For example, pre-breakup stage, and then we're going to have police charging. Basically, right now, who makes the decision? The discretion is with the police. Whatever officer it is who gets the report is then going to look at one person's version and see that this attitude or this behavior actually falls within the legislation, and they'll charge. The only checks and balances we have is that the police officers know what they're doing. And sure, we can educate them, but even then you've got a very, very subjective approach behind that. Now, with violence, it's a little bit easier, because if someone hits someone, it's an act of violence. With this, as you said earlier, it's subjective, it's relative. And if people or couples or whatever their relationship model is these days, they decide to act within certain framework that they've set up for themselves, then who are we to say that's wrong? So I agree. I actually, unfortunately, at this stage, maybe I'm uneducated on this, I don't see any way that we can have the right checks and balances apart from going to court, going through the system, and then coming out the other end. By then you spend a lot of money, a lot of time, your relationship's gone, essentially. So what's that going to actually achieve? Increase the amount of work the courts are doing, and are we actually safening society? Are we actually protecting genuine victims? No, I don't think we are.
And someone else had a question. What is the standard of evidence? What do you think to that?
Basically, first thing, evidence can be what the victim says. So in a case of domestic violence in New South Wales, we have what is called a DVEC. Essentially, that's just a video that's taken of the victim, and she gives her version of events. Now, with this, I'm sure we're going to need more evidence, but that in itself is evidence. So what the victim says in the stand or in court is evidence, and prior to court in cases of domestic violence. Then the defendant will generally go up. He or she does not have to give evidence. It's their choice. But if they do, that then forms the other side. And of course, the cross-examination in between. So the basic standard of evidence is going to be the victim saying, this is what he did to me. And whether it's a written statement or whether it's a video recorded statement, that is the basic level of evidence that's required. Then it comes down to performing the balancing act that the magistrate or judge will do and come to a decision about whether this person is actually guilty. On top of that, I'm guessing we're going to have SMSs, we're going to have Instagram messages, Facebook messages, whatever the case may be. Then we will have, I'm guessing again, but people supporting or corroborating that version of events. That's why I said both parties can get the corroborating version of events. SMSs or messages can look one way because if you get SMSs from a particular day, one party might be very aggressive, one party may not. Then on a different day, it's the exact opposite. So how far back are we going to go? Generally, when it comes to an act of violence, we don't look at the past because it's not considered relevant by law. However, in this case, we're definitely looking at the past. Now, the question is, how far in the past? I don't think this has been thought through properly.
No, the whole thing just is so ludicrous to me. And, when you first contacted me, you expressed concerns about people, women in this instance, weaponizing the law for things like custody disputes or to alienate children from their parents. This bill just seems to me so fraught with danger with all of that in mind, weaponizing another thing basically to throw in and just to slow down the legal process, cost more money, slow it all down, and another weapon potentially to be used by vindictive exes. What do you think?
I agree. I do agree. And if anything, this makes it slightly easier because now a lot of this behavior is reported in affidavits in the family court. A lot of this. Judges will see this day in, day out. Now we're just giving it a criminal element to it because we're now saying this is a specific offence. So not just that, you're probably going to have more people going to the police to complain about this prior to filing their family law proceeding. So yes, I definitely agree. It's going to increase the workload because this opens up what a criminal charge should actually be. And then the problem is, by this point, even if there was a defence of reasonableness, so this is one thing that we can't forget, there is a defence in the legislation, I think it's 14D, there is a defence of reasonableness. How's that going to apply? What's reasonable in the circumstances? Again, this is perception, this is relative, but that's too simplistic to say. So I agree, we're going to get a further backlog in the system. This is not going to assist. And I think further research needs to be done. We need to look at better ways to deal with this. And again, I get why they're trying to do it, but at the moment, it's just not right.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for talking to me, Samir. Speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much. Love it to be here.
Really concerning, isn't it? I'm going to keep across these developments in the Coercive Control Bill, and I'll keep you posted. When politicians like Senator Larissa Waters post photos of themselves with feminist lawyers and feminist legal academics, this is when we must stand up and voice our concerns. All of this connects together. And remember, that's what all of this is about, connecting the dots so that you can get a really clear picture of how all this nonsense fits together. Now, this is the shed where Good Source has been producing my show. We're on a mission to turn it into a professional TV studio. As you can see, the magic happens in a pretty modest little setting. Thanks to supporters, we only now need an extra 20,000 to finish the work ready for Queensland election night. You can play an important part of this by donating to the website. The link is on the screen now. The link is also in the description beneath the video too. Our long-term mission is to tell the stories that mainstream media isn't telling. We want to create new, honest media. You can help us fight fake news. Your donation makes sure that this public service is here for a long time, not just for now. On a brighter note, and hopefully where we can focus on actually heading, take a look at this ad from Northern Ireland. The Post says, "Domestic abuse can affect anyone, anywhere. It's important for you to know the signs of domestic abuse and where to get help. Please take a moment to watch our animation and learn more." This video is actually gender neutral, and this, ladies and gentlemen, is where we need to be heading to really make a difference. In this battle for true equality, we must all stand and fight for justice. Right, that's enough Barraclough for now. See you next week.
The Corrine Barraclough Show is a production of The Good Source, hosted by Corrine Barraclough. To watch, listen to, or read more new media without the social justice warrior narratives or politically correct fact filter, visit goodsource.news. That's good, SAUCE.news. Become a Good Source supporter for exclusive access to live and unedited interview recordings, including the conversations before and after the show.